Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Armenian News Network Groong Weekend Review for August 31, 2025. Today, we're talking with Benyamin Poghosyan, a senior fellow at APRI Armenia, a Yerevan-based think tank.
We will go to Benyamin very shortly, but I just want to remind you to please consider liking, commenting, and sharing this podcast because it helps us increase our reach. And if you're feeling extra generous, then go to podcasts.groong.org/donate and become a supporter of the only independent English language podcast focusing on Armenia and its region, producing regular quality content such as this show, and help us rise above the noise that is being generated by various foreign-funded, foreign-supported organizations that dominate the media today in Armenia.
Yeah, thank you for that. And if giving financially is not in your thoughts today, that's okay. Share our shows, like our shows, and comment on our shows, and that'll be a lot of help for us. Thank you so much.
All right, on with the show.
Hello, Benyamin. Welcome to the Groong podcast.
Hello, Asbed. Hello, Hovik. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
Hello, Benjamin. So as we are coming fresh out of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit in Tianjin, China, let's talk about that because it is going on with a significant amount of fanfare. From the perspective of multipolarity, it's viewed as a big thing. And Larry Johnson argues that Western leaders still cling to the illusion of an unshakable U.S. hegemony. But the reality on display in Tianjin seems to be different, which is China, Russia, and India shaking hands and presenting themselves as co-architects of a new system that rejects Western veto power and external influence. And Xi Jinping openly called for a new global security order, framing the SCO as a model of international relations outside of Washington's reach. Now, Pashinyan also attended the summit, helping portray the image that even states tied to the West are compelled to engage with the SCO. But we'll talk about that separately. So before focusing on Pashinyan, can you tell us about the larger picture and the global context of the summit as you see it?
Thank you. Frankly speaking, I'm not sure we can say that Western leaders still believe that there is a unipolar world because 2 or 3 years ago, Secretary Blinken clearly stated that unipolar world is over. And I think a few months ago, new Secretary of State Marco Rubio stated that the unipolar world and US hegemony is over. So I think that at least part of the Western elites understand that we are in the interregnum period. What does it mean, interregnum? The old order ended. We do not have still a new order, so we are in between. But definitely we can call it post-unipolar world. We cannot call it multipolar, bipolar, but we are in post-unipolar world. Regarding Shanghai Cooperation Organization, okay, this is an organization which brings in China, I think, up to 25 leaders. China, Russia, India, and the SCO GDP per world share is reaching 30%, and population is reaching 40-45%. So definitely we can say that this is a grouping of non-Western states. Yes, many states have a lot of problems between each others. Let's only mention India-Pakistan, and even India-China still have problems, despite they are now trying to improve relations, but it's ups and downs. Improvement, tensions. So it's not like a monolith block, like for example, NATO, when more or less everything is under US control now. But still, it's a grouping of non-Western powers, and it sends a message that yes, at least in this case, Mr. Blinken and Mr. Rubio, they were and are right, that unipolar world is over, and we are in between. Let's see what order we will have. It could be bipolar, multipolar, no polar, jungle, chaos, or whatever. So this is a key message of SCO.
So in Tianjin, Pashinyan met Xi Jinping to announce a new strategic partnership with China, signing on to projects covering trade rules, connectivity, and of course the Belt and Road Initiative. Armenia was the last state in the South Caucasus to establish the strategic partnership with China. We note that with Georgia, this partnership was established in 2023, and with Azerbaijan earlier this year in April. So Xi offered the prospect of also Armenia joining the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. At the same time, Pashinyan also met with Putin at this conference, and they stressed active dialogue as if trying to keep Moscow appeased. The irony is sharp, of course. While Yerevan passes legislation to join the European Union, and last week essentially was spent towards a China and Russia-led bloc, and that has raised the eyebrows of many observers. So I want to ask, Pashinyan keeps piling up strategic partnerships. We know that Armenia has signed a strategic partnership with Iran, Georgia, the US, the UK, which we'll talk about in the same week as now with China, maybe even Pakistan next. So what does this the word strategic actually mean in these deals? Are all strategic partnerships built the same?
Okay, first of all, on Armenia-China relations. As far as I know, China offered to establish strategic partnership with Armenia back in 2024. At that time, Armenian government was hesitant, thinking that it may harm these US-Armenia relations. It was a period when we were negotiating the strategic partnership charter with the United States. And then when Trump came to power, initially in January, February, March, it seemed that establishing strategic partnership with China may even trigger harsher reaction from the United States due to Trump's anti-China statement and etc. I think the key here was, it may sound a little bit strange, but the establishment of strategic partnership between US and Azerbaijan on August 8. Because as you mentioned, Azerbaijan established strategic partnership with China in 2024, and then in April 2025, Azerbaijan elevated its relations with China into comprehensive strategic partnership. And then all of a sudden, while only in April 2025, Azerbaijan established comprehensive strategic partnership with China, US agreed in August 2025, established strategic partnership with Azerbaijan. And I think this sends a clear message to Armenia that you simultaneously may have strategic partnership with China and establish strategic partnership with the United States. So all the fears that any strategic partnership with China, regardless what does it mean, even like symbolic, but still a strategic partnership may trigger harsh reaction from Trump administration, at least in Azerbaijan case, we see that it didn't happen. So I think after that, Armenia understood that, okay, if Azerbaijan may afford to establish strategic partnership with the United States, having comprehensive strategic partnership with China, then Armenia having strategic partnership with the United States may establish strategic partnership with China. If you ask me what does it mean on the ground, or in reality, I think we have to wait and see. The key for China is economic relations. As of now, Armenia has almost no Chinese investments. Georgia has some investments through Hualing Group, and Azerbaijan has some Chinese investments. Armenia
Yeah, and in
has
fact,
none.
if I could mention, I think the Chinese investment in Georgia is about 100 million.
I would say that according to my knowledge, Chinese investment in Georgia may reach up to 1 billion because it's real estate, and also this Hualing Group has some shares in Poti Free Trade Zone, so it could be up to 1 billion.
That's
And
similar
China,
to Azerbaijan, I guess, right?
yeah. And China provided through Asian Investments Banks, this AIIB bank, China provided up to 1 billion loans to Azerbaijan for TANAP construction and overall Southern Gas Corridor construction. So we have to wait and see. If we will have some interesting economic projects in Armenia, it means that this strategic partnership will get something. Otherwise, I may assume that China has strategic partnership with probably more than 100 countries, and some is just 2 or 3 pages of paper. My understanding is that, for example, China will be interested to take part in the construction of next nuclear power plant. We all know that current nuclear power plant will be closed in 2036. We have 11 years, and now discussions are underway with the United States, and also Russians are telling that discussions are underway with Russia. And both the US and Russia are offering the big nuclear power plants or the so-called small modular nuclear power plants. For example, one of the areas when you can bring Chinese investments and also make Armenia a little bit more interesting for China is this investments in nuclear technologies, because China is now one of the leading countries in the world regarding nuclear technologies. I'm telling this as an example. So if you want to really have strategic partnership with China and make China think about Armenia, not just one of the very tiny small countries somewhere in the world, then you should offer some interesting suggestions to China regarding investments. Nuclear technologies could be one of them. For example, renewable energies, another. So we have to wait and see. If there is no significant investments, then this will be just another box-ticking exercise.
So the strategic partnership, let's say, for example, between Azerbaijan and Georgia has a military and security component. Do any of the strategic partnerships that Armenia has with Iran, Georgia, US, China, UK, do any of these strategic partnership agreements have a military or a security component?
First, I would like to clarify that still we do not have strategic partnership with Iran. The agreement on strategic partnership is being negotiated, and it's now is being negotiated. There were some rumors or hopes that it may be signed during President Pezeshkian's visit to Armenia, but it did not happen, maybe because of Washington summit in August 2025. But still, discussions are underway, and maybe Armenia will sign strategic partnership agreement with Iran by the end of 2025 or early 2026. Let's see. Regarding defense cooperation, frankly speaking, you do not need strategic partnership to have defense cooperation. Armenia has no strategic partnership agreement with India. Zero. There is no. But India is the biggest weapon supplier to Armenia, and according to different public sources, it's more than $1 billion. Armenia still has no strategic partnership with France, and we signed up to €500 million of defense cooperation agreements with France. What I would like to say is that you may have no strategic partnership, but you may buy billions of dollars of weapons, and you may have strategic partnership and have a zero defense cooperation. So I don't see any direct connections. Regarding the strategic partnership, as you mentioned, we established strategic partnership with UK very recently, with Netherlands a few months ago, with United States in January 2025, with China just a few days ago. Does it mean that we will have defense cooperation with all of them? I don't know, but it's not necessary. Again, you may have no strategic partnership and have defense cooperation and vice versa.
Benjamin, I'm still struggling with the word strategic. I've always put the connotation on the word strategic to have something to do with augmenting your national security, maybe. Are these agreements that are being signed actually doing that for Armenia? If not defense, let's try to get out of defense and hardware, but let's just talk about, are they actually increasing Armenia's national security?
In some sort, yes, but not in a way when we think. I mean, these partnerships are not agreements about alliances. So if tomorrow, hopefully not, any country will attack Armenia, neither Netherlands, nor UK, nor China has no responsibilities and no duties to support Armenia, to help Armenia to do anything. So I would say that these are just diversifying Armenian foreign policy, diversifying our diplomatic relations, maybe adding a little bit diplomatic deterrence, but to say that they significantly boost Armenia's national security, I'm not in a position to argue. So it's not a zero, but also it's not a significant boost.
Benjamin, Pashinyan met with Xi Jinping, Putin, Narendra Modi, of course, Erdogan and Aliyev. And we talked about Armenia's establishment of diplomatic relations with Pakistan as well. Is there logic to Pashinyan's diplomacy right now? Is this an example of the so-called balanced and balancing policy, or is it basically meet everyone you can, get as many photo ops you can, and see what happens? How would you explain this diplomacy?
Okay, first of all, I'm not sure what does it mean balanced and balancing foreign policy. I mean, from academic or whatever point of view, but if you go to the real life, I think what the Armenian government is doing, they are trying to send signals to different centers of powers, trying to appease both of them. For example, in March 2025, we adopted a law about starting of the EU integration or membership process. Of course, this was an imitation, but still, the idea was somehow to send positive signals and create positive momentum in the European Union and maybe in the United States towards Armenia. Simultaneously, then we officially applied to become a full member of Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Currently, we're a dialogue of partner. And this was effort to send some signals and create some positive attitude toward Armenia in China and maybe in Russia or in Global South. So as of now, I think government's policy, the number one issue is to prevent any hostilities, at least in a short-term perspective, to be very frank, at least until 2026 June parliamentary elections. because the lack of hostilities or absence of hostilities can be interpreted, which is government is doing, as de facto peace, and use this to try to get votes of population, telling that I promised you and I brought you the real peace. So the key driver behind Armenian foreign policy as of now is this. So do everything to reduce the risk of escalation by Azerbaijan and simultaneously to reduce the risk of any major power hostile action against Armenia and against Armenian government. At least before elections, Armenia is not interested, and I believe government is not interested, to have a situation when any major power which has a potential to interfere into the domestic affairs of Armenia through different means, to give them any base for some hostile action against current government. So they are trying to be good with everyone, at least until June 2026.
I mean, that's a really short timeline. So can we say
Yeah,
that
this
there's
is a really
real
short
peace?
timeline, but frankly speaking, given what crazy world we live, when every moment we may have war or we are having the wars, maybe 9 months is a short, but it's not like 1 second. After June 2026, if current government and the ruling party secures a victory, then we have to see. Because for the next 5-year period, I think it will be extremely complicated to somehow appease or make happy everyone. Let's make happy Europeans, Americans, Chinese, Russians, Iranians. But even current government is not doing it very skillfully. Because, for example, on a Washington summit, we all understand that Russia and Iran cannot be happy if really Americans will appear in Munich. Regardless, it will be private company, it will be a joint Armenian-US company, it will be company registered in Armenia, it will be company within full Armenian jurisdiction. Russia and Iran could not be happy. So you cannot make everyone happy, but still government is trying.
To me, I can't resist, but to me, this sounds like someone who is on the verge of bankruptcy saying, okay, I'm going to get one more credit card just so that I can delay my bankruptcy by 1 year, and then we'll figure out what happens in 2026. But in reality, I mean, coming back to the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, is the SCO direction or really interesting for Armenia? What perspective, what advantages does it offer to Armenia if Armenia really pursues this integration?
Let's look into the geography. Based simple on geography, for me it's clear that South Caucasus cannot be fully part of the Western Bloc in this post-unipolar world, or cannot be fully part of the Western Pole. Let's call Western Pole led by US, US plus EU led by United States. South Caucasus cannot be fully part of the Western Pole because of geography, because we have Russia and Iran, and they are not going to be part of Western Pole, and we have a Turkey, while it's a part of Western Pole through its membership to NATO, but still also trying to balancing. While if you look into the non-Western Pole and SCO, which Russia is member, India is member, Iran is member, China is member, and etc., it's clear that this non-Western pole will have significant influence in the South Caucasus, at least through Russia and Iran. So strategically, this is my understanding. South Caucasus has two options. Either we are going to be some sort of battleground or the fault line between different poles in this post-unipolar world, and this is very bad because we will be a place when the different poles are trying to solve their issues. Or South Caucasus can be some sort of bridge, economic bridge, political bridge, and also the place of strategic convenience, like bringing officials, experts, and etc. from different poles. So from this perspective, you have to develop relation with the SCO, because even if South Caucasus will be this bridge state, let's call it bridge area, still you will have significant influence of non-Western powers. And as of now, Shanghai Cooperation Organization is one of the most powerful blocks of this non-Western world. So you have to deal with non-Western world, because non-Western world, it's having and will have significant influence in the South Caucasus.
Benjamin, as was mentioned earlier, on the sidelines of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit, Armenia and Pakistan established diplomatic relations. This is a move that surprised many people, given Islamabad's long record of rabid and unconditional support for Turkey and Azerbaijan, including during the 2020 and 2023 wars and the ethnic cleansing of Artsakh. In earlier shows, we have actually discussed how Pakistan was one of the few countries, maybe the only country alongside Turkey, to deny the very existence of Armenia. It didn't want to recognize Armenia's independence and didn't want to establish diplomatic ties with it. So
I think even
suddenly,
Turkey, Asbed, even Turkey recognized Armenia's independence.
that's right.
Yes, Turkey
Armenia was
recognized
maybe the
Armenia's
first country
independence.
that recognized the independence. Absolutely. So what's the significance here of establishing diplomatic relations with Pakistan? Does this mean that Aliyev has maybe begun to drop his demands of isolating Armenia from his allies, Turkey and Pakistan?
First of all, Pakistan was supporting Azerbaijan mostly because of so-called occupation of Nagorno-Karabakh. And the current Armenian government, when the government is telling that there is a no Nagorno-Karabakh, Nagorno-Karabakh is Azerbaijan, and Armenians did mistake by starting the Karabakh movement, and government will not allow the continuation of Karabakh movement in Armenia, then the primary reason of, let's say, like animosity towards Armenia from Pakistani side, the primary reason has evaporated. But of course, it does not mean that Azerbaijan drops any demand. If under the demands, we understand the demand for Zangezur corridor, demand for the establishment of Western Azerbaijan, and etc. No, Azerbaijan will continue to do that. And by the way, during today's speech, during this SCO Plus summit, President Aliyev again spoke about Zangezur corridor. He spoke about Washington summit, and he said that he's sure that Zangezur corridor will be beneficial not only for Azerbaijan but also for the entire region. Like he clearly stated that from his perspective, TRIPP is a Zangezur corridor, or TRIPP is just another name for Zangezur corridor. Of course, Prime Minister Pashinyan countered him in his speech, telling that we agreed to clear terminology or terms in Washington, and the term which is used by President Aliyev is not in line with our understanding, but this is a completely different issue, which shows that how shaky is Washington Declaration itself, and how Armenia and Azerbaijan will misinterpret or interpret differently.
So
Azerbaijan will
essentially,
continue
Aliyev
to claim
mocked
corridor.
Pashinyan publicly at
Yeah.
the SCO.
So no drop of any demands by Azerbaijan. But regarding why this happened, I don't exclude that somehow Turkey was mediating this. Because if you look, if Armenia is trying to normalize relation with Azerbaijan and Turkey, then from Turkish perspective, I think Turkey should do everything to bring Armenia closer to its allies. And we all know that Turkey, Pakistan, and Azerbaijan are strategic allies. They are having military drills. The leaders met in Berzor in May 2025, and leaders of three countries. So from Turkish perspective, it's clear. Like slowly but pull Armenia towards the ring of Turkish alliances or minilateral groupings. So from this perspective, I think it could be quite logical if this was facilitated by Turkey, or at least initial message was sent by Turkey, both to Armenia and Pakistan, that, okay, let's make a first step and let's establish diplomatic relations. So mostly I view this step within this Turkish policy of pulling Armenia closer to the mini groupings where Turkey has a leading role.
So do you think that this establishment of relations with Pakistan possibly portends the establishment of relations with Turkey?
Look, establishment of relations with Turkey is a very complicated issue. From one point of view, Turkey is interested to have relations with Armenia, which will help Turkey to have more influence in South Caucasus and potentially even replace Russia as a primary player in the South Caucasus. But also, Turkish policy in the South Caucasus is based on Azerbaijan first strategy due to different reasons: economic connections, political connections, business connections, etc. My understanding is that Turkey will wait until the signature of peace agreement between Azerbaijan and Armenia. But because I have doubts that this agreement is ever going to be signed, because there is a precondition of constitutional change, there could be other preconditions, so it's like a vague. So I'm not in a position to say that we are very close to the opening of Armenia-Turkey border, so I would not connect Armenia-Pakistan normalization with potential opening of Armenia-Turkey border.
Okay, thank you. Well, speaking about strategic partnerships here, I want to move to the other side of the planet. And the UK's Europe Minister, Stephen Dody, visited Yerevan last week, meeting Pashinyan, Deputy Foreign Minister Gostanyan, and also the NSC chair, Grigoryan, Armen Grigoryan, as well as visiting the Armenian Genocide Memorial. So like a full Monty of diplomatic visits in Yerevan. He did this right after he was in Baku and met with Aliyev also. London and Yerevan agreed to raise ties to a strategic level with plans to have resident defense attaches with each other, cyber and hybrid threat cooperation, and support for reforms and sovereignty. In Baku, Aliyev and Bayramov hailed 30 years of cooperation, BP pipelines, and growing energy ties. In Armenia, the focus was more on briefing each other on agreements, especially the agreements in Washington. Can you talk a little bit about what the interests of the UK are in Armenia and the wider South Caucasus, and how are they affected by the Trump or Zangezur corridors? I shouldn't say corridors, I should just say corridor. It's one thing. Whether you
Yes,
talk about
or
TRIPP or Trump route or the Zangezur corridor, it's different brands for the same route.
I think probably the primary interest of the UK to weaken as much as possible Russia's position. And I think even this multi-billion-dollar investment in Azerbaijan was a way to increase Azerbaijani state capacities, and all these energy flows from Azerbaijan via Georgia to Turkey in Europe, and which provide Azerbaijan with a lot of money. Also, this helped Azerbaijan become more or less independent country. So primary goal is to weaken Russia's position. And I think UK understands that if TRIPP is going to be implemented, and if Americans will appear in Munich, regardless in what capacity, private company like Armenian American consortium registered in Armenia or in whatever capacities, this will be another step towards weakening Russia's position in the South Caucasus. So this is their primary goal. Plus, I don't exclude that they are interested in Azerbaijan-Turkey transit via Armenia. I mean, this Azerbaijan, Sunik, Nakhichevan, Turkey connection, and you know that Turkey started the construction of Kars-Nakhichevan Railway, which probably will be finished somewhere in 2028, 2029, because maybe they have some concerns that transit via Georgia may become more and more complex due to the deteriorating relations between Georgia and the West, or potential growing Russian influence in Georgia. So from their perspective, okay, let's weaken Russia's position in the South Caucasus, but also let's have the second transit route, which if things with Georgia will go to the complete wrong direction, then maybe they believe that they can like reroute the main transit between Azerbaijan and Turkey in Central Asia and Turkey via Armenia. I see these two primary interests of UK in the South Caucasus.
Benjamin, in July, Dodi signed off on a revision of the UK ban on selling weapons to Armenia and Azerbaijan. Now, instead of weapons that could be used in Nagorno-Karabakh, and now that Nagorno-Karabakh is not a hot war or an issue, I guess that has changed. Does this mean that Britain can now sell weapons to Azerbaijan? And who would these weapons be aimed at if theoretically they're not going to be aimed at Armenians?
Okay, my understanding is theoretically even Armenia can buy weapons from UK. So as of now, like there is no at least legal obstacles for Armenia to buy weapons from UK, because like from UK perspective, conflict is over, so it's a no conflict zone. So UK can sell weapons both to Azerbaijan and Armenia. Okay, look, to be very frank, Azerbaijan is pushing narratives that I need weapons potentially to resist Russia or to resist Iran. This is Azerbaijani narrative. But I think no serious person can believe that Azerbaijan really needs weapons to resist Iran, and especially Russia, because it's clear that even if you will supply Azerbaijan with significant weapons, like Russia is much, much stronger. So I have a feeling that this is something like a cover-up operation. You are selling weapons to Azerbaijan, telling that, oh, this will be used or potentially can be used to protect or defend Azerbaijan against malign activities of Russia and Iran. But you understand that still Azerbaijan demands the corridor, Western Azerbaijan, and etc. And Azerbaijan uses threat of force to compel Armenia to do things A, B, C. So by selling weapons to Azerbaijan, you just making Azerbaijan more capable to force Armenia to make additional concessions, while covering it up with some nice words which hear very nicely to Western ears. Oh, let's help Azerbaijan, the poor Azerbaijan, bad Russia, bad Iran, and etc. For me, this is some sort of cover-up operation, frankly speaking.
You previously mentioned the east-west, the so-called Trump route, which we know is only east-west, right? Is the UK interested in the wider network of corridors that Armenia has, in the offer, such as I guess, Crossroads of Peace? How is that coming along? And I haven't heard anything too much about Crossroads of Peace after this August 8th signing.
Okay, my understanding is that for the UK and probably also for the US, but we are speaking about UK, the key goal is this east-west connection, like Azerbaijan, Sunik, Nakhichevan, Turkey. Okay, if Azerbaijan will allow Armenia to reach Russia via mainland Azerbaijan or to reach Iran via Nakhichevan, probably UK will not declare war against Azerbaijan. But I don't believe that UK will force Azerbaijan to open its borders with Armenia via Nakhichevan or via mainland Azerbaijan. So from UK perspective, okay, if all communications are restored, UK is okay. But if even only one route is opened, connecting Azerbaijan with Turkey, UK is fine also. So I'm not sure that they will put too much effort to force Azerbaijan to allow Armenia to use Nakhichevan territory or mainland Azerbaijan territory. And it's clear that Azerbaijan has no intention to allow Armenia to use Nakhichevan to reach Iran or use Azerbaijan to reach Russia as an alternative to the Georgian route. So if no one is putting pressure on Azerbaijan, simply Azerbaijan will not do that. And I don't think that UK will be the one who will put pressure on Azerbaijan.
All right, let's move on, Benjamin. So this week, Pashinyan finally published the August 8th Washington memoranda. They were not publishing it for weeks, leading to wide-scale speculation about, the contents. Now, surprisingly or unsurprisingly, once they were published, they remain vague. Like there are three MOUs, one on border security, one on semiconductors, and the other one on energy. It's full of talk about capacity building and cooperation, but importantly, there is no mention of this so-called 99-year lease or even anything about the amount of years. The only thing is mentioned is like I think a 3-year cycle for renewal. And even the word corridor is absent. But Trump and Tom Barak openly use those terms in the context of the Trump route. And Pashinyan, meanwhile, continues to insist that Armenia retains full sovereignty, and this was agreed upon. Meanwhile, Aliyev claims his demands have been met, with the exception for the change of the constitution. Now, to us, the problem is clear. Either these documents say nothing about the substance of what was agreed upon, or what was promised and are understood are very different from what's on paper. So we will talk about that. But also, I want to mention that.
Can I interject?
Yeah.
You said, which is the Constitution. I just want to say the preconditions, because we're not even sure exactly what all the preconditions are. There's still there are still issues of border.
Yeah.
That's right, border commissions that haven't done their work, enclave issues, exclave issues, all these things. Western Azerbaijan supposedly, all these things are just fuzzy. We don't know what these preconditions are.
Yeah. And you know what? This talk of peace is interesting. Let me just put it that way. Many parties, international organizations, have been congratulating Armenia and Azerbaijan on the establishment of peace, even though we're far from it. And even you yourself previously today, Benjamin, said that you are skeptical about the real signing of peace and Azerbaijan's intentions. Might we add that even in Kosovo, which many see as the most one-sided conflict outcome in modern times, there are still Serbs living in Kosovo. By contrast, the Washington document says nothing about the rights of Artsakh refugees or protecting Armenian cultural heritage in Artsakh, and even the issue of Armenian hostages held in Baku was downplayed by Pashinyan in his chatter with Trump. So Benjamin, also don't want to put you on the spot, but I have to mention that you were part of this Armenian-Azerbaijani expert strategic platform, and your signature or your name is under the statement that says that this platform is welcoming this Washington memorandum as a step towards peace, and the statement itself also did not mention anything about Artsakh Armenians. So can I ask you, why did the group that you're part of take that position? And since the main demand, at least one of the demands, still remains in force, which is the change of Armenia's constitution, how realistic is Baku's real intention and Yerevan's ability to deliver this constitutional change?
Yeah, regarding the group statement, as you mentioned, we said that this is a step towards peace, and this was really, you cannot say that this was nothing. This was step towards peace, but in the last 30 years, there were many steps towards peace. We can jump starting from 2009 Madrid principles, or go back to the 1996 or 1997 package or step-by-step solutions, then Kazan document, Key West, and etc. So there were a lot of steps towards peace. Unfortunately, at the end of the day, we have a war, and Nagorno-Karabakh was destroyed. Now we are speaking about Armenia-Azerbaijan peace, and what happened in Washington, this was a step towards peace. But will we have peace or we are not going to have a peace? It's a big question mark. Regarding the MOUs which were signed, my understanding is that there is absolutely no agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan how this TRIPP is going to function. Again, this is my personal understanding. Zero agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan how TRIPP is going to function. Because again, even today, during this Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit, we saw the absolutely different interpretations of Washington declarations. President Aliyev stating when he was speaking about the Washington Summit and Washington Declaration and documents signed in Washington, President Aliyev clearly spoke about Zangezur corridor. He said that finally Zangezur corridor will be implemented as a result of Washington Summit, while Prime Minister Pashinyan countered him, telling that there is no terminology about corridors and there was nothing about corridors. So, zero agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan. I'm not sure if there is a clear agreement even between Armenia and the United States. Maybe in like very vague or strategic terms, there is some sort of agreement between Armenia and the United States that at least legally, this TRIPP should function under Armenia's sovereignty. At least legally. What will happen de facto, I'm not sure. But I believe that there is no agreement between Armenia and the US regarding the details. And my understanding is that for the details of TRIPP, you will need another document. So another document should be prepared.
Is it possible that that document has already been signed, like a secret, even appendix, or maybe even a secret document between Armenia and the US, or Armenia, US, and Azerbaijan?
Well, they're saying they're going to get together in September again and discuss more details of the agreements or the MOUs.
Yeah, but we also know that, I mean, I don't think the practice of signing secret documents or secret appendices is completely,
it's not foreign.
It's not foreign,
Yeah.
So maybe, I know that, Benya, our guest would probably not, know about this if it's secret, truly. But, what are your thoughts about this? Because it seems really weird that that Trump is talking about corridors and 99-year leases, and Pashinyan keeps saying that there is nothing about timelines mentioned here.
Okay, to be very frank, if we were speaking about any other leader, like any other leader of any other major country, like Russia or China, I would say yes. If the leader of Russia and China are speaking about 99 years or whatever, this is very serious. It means that there is some secret oral or even written agreements. But when we are speaking about President Trump, whose attention span is probably like 60 minutes, and we know that just 2 days after signing, he thought that he was bringing peace to Albania. So I'm not sure what he was speaking about. Maybe someone told him something, that maybe there is some idea, and you know that Tom Barrack is his personal friend. Who knows? Maybe Barrack sent us some WhatsApp message telling that, oh, I think it's a good idea to have 99 years old. Trump read this WhatsApp message and suddenly during press conference remembered that he got some WhatsApp message from Tom Barrack. So frankly speaking, if it was President Putin or President Xi, I would say definitely this is very serious. On President Trump, given, look, even if you look into like, maybe it's not directly connected to our topic, but like US-Russia relations, President Trump stated like 10 times in the last 2 months that he's going to put sanctions on Russia, deadlines, etc., etc., etc. Then he ended with meeting with President Putin. Then he agreed something with President Putin. Then he said that he didn't agree something with President Putin. So frankly speaking, given President Trump's foreign policy record of the last 8 months, I'm not in a position to say that what is telling President Trump has 100% real base. Of course, everything is possible. They are asking, is it possible that some secret things have been signed? Of course, it's possible. Like you cannot 100% reject if you were not in the room of negotiations. But still, my understanding is that if it's not the case that we already have some secret agreement signed, for modalities of TRIPP, Armenia and the United States will need to elaborate a document, legally binding document, not an MOU declaration which has zero legal force. Legally binding document, maybe interstate document, which potentially also probably could be or should be ratified by Armenian parliament, go to the constitutional court, etc., to finalize the modalities of TRIPP. This is my understanding, that without existence of legally binding document, TRIPP is not going to happen. Simply.
Okay. So, let's come to the Iranian reactions. 2 weeks ago, it was after August 8, Iran's President Pezeshkian visited Yerevan, and there were many agreements signed. Yet, from his statements, it sounded like he left with more unanswered questions about the Trump route than when he arrived. I just want to remind people, he said that, prior to the visit, Iran was sending signals that, they're like lukewarm about this deal. Maybe our Iranian red lines were preserved. And after leaving Yerevan, he insisted that Iranian red lines must be preserved. Then, 2 days ago, Armen Grigoryan, chair of the Armenian National Security Council, spent a long day in Tehran meetings with his counterparts, the president, the foreign minister, and so on. It seems to be like a very high-profile visit for a chairman of the Security Council. Now, President Pezeshkian said that the visit by Grigoryan contributed to effectively addressing the existing uncertainties, in Iran. So again, we're seeing mixed signals. Of course, I'm not even citing the reactions from the representatives of the IRGC or even the advisors to the supreme leader of Iran. So I want to ask you, are Iran's concerns addressed or not addressed? Is Iran justified in its concerns with potential U.S. presence on its border?
Okay, let's put it this way. If I was an expert sitting in Tehran, of course, I will be concerned by any U.S. presence along Armenian-Iran border, given the Iran-Israel war, given U.S. direct military attack against Iran, and given the likelihood of another Iran-Israel war in the coming months, and likelihood of another U.S. military strike against Iran. Of course, if you are sitting in Tehran and you are expert or you are responsible for your country's foreign and defense policy, you should have concerns. I think the problem here is that Armenian government cannot answer all Iranian questions because, as I mentioned, Armenian government has no answer to this question. Again, if there is no agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan, how this TRIPP is going to function, and if there is no signed clear agreement even between Armenia and the United States about technical details, how this TRIPP route is going to be function. Again, maybe there is an understanding between Armenia and the United States that this will be within Armenian territorial integrity and sovereignty. Okay, sounds excellent, but we all know that the devil always in details. So Iranians are coming to Armenia, or Armenians are going to Iran, and Iranians are asking concrete questions. I assume they are asking concrete questions, while Armenian officials are not in a position to provide concrete answers because they don't know the answers, because the details are not agreed. Armenian officials are repeating like a mantra, everything will be within Armenian territorial integrity, sovereignty, and jurisdiction. But then Iranians asking are, okay, for example, like a question, will Armenians check Azerbaijani passports? Nobody knows. Will Armenians do some custom checks? Nobody knows. Will Americans do passport control for Azerbaijanis, scan Azerbaijani passports, and then share the information with Armenians? Okay, nobody knows. If Americans are going to do that, what kind of Americans? This will be private American citizens? This will be like who? Based on what? And if these are Americans, it means that Americans will be deployed physically along Armenian-Iran border. What are the guarantees that besides checking Azerbaijani passports or scanning Azerbaijani trains, they will not do anything else? So my understanding is that Iranians will ask, or probably they are asking, all these questions to Prime Minister, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Secretary of Security Council, Deputy Foreign Minister, but our officials cannot provide answers because they don't know. The problem is that they don't know. They can speak only in a very vague strategic term, that everything again will be within Armenian sovereignty, territorial integrity, and jurisdiction. When you are going into details, they cannot provide answers because they don't know, because there are no agreements. And of course, because they are not in a position to provide detailed answers, because they don't know the detailed answers, of course, Iran's concern will remain. Because Iran may say, okay, you don't know the details, which means that details should be negotiated later. Okay, but what are the guarantees? What will be the result of these future negotiations? How you can give us 100% guarantees that as a result of these upcoming negotiations, you will not do something which Iran may perceive as unacceptable? No one can guarantee to Iranians. And that is why we have this situation.
Benjamin, one of the key concessions or key benefits that Aliyev got in Washington was the agreement that the OSCE Minsk group was going to be dissolved And of course, that happened today. It was slated to happen on September 1st. We're recording this on September 1st. And just today, the OSCE Council of Ministers announced the decision to close the Minsk group. It's done. So essentially, there's no international platform to discuss the cause of the Artsakh Nagorno-Karabakh self-determination issue and the right of return of the people. So where does this leave the case of 150,000 Artsakh Armenians who were ethnically cleansed and are disenfranchised refugees in Armenia?
Okay, to be very frank, this leaves the question to nowhere if we speak about international fora. But much depends on Armenian society inside Armenia, on Armenian diaspora, and on Armenian government. Of course, current government position is very clear, and Prime Minister stated it many times. I don't want to repeat. We all know what Prime Minister thinks about Nagorno-Karabakh movement and about the possibilities to right of return of Armenians or the possibilities to continue to demand the right of return or whatever.
Benyamin Pashinyan explicitly has said, forget your rights, forget your homeland.
Yes.
He said that the Artsakh cause should be shut down. It was a historic mistake, etc.,
Yes,
etc.
you're right.
In fact, even talking about the rights of Artsakh people is a threat to Armenia's security.
That's right.
Yes, or continuation of Karabakh movement in Armenia or continuation of movement to demand right of return is a threat to Armenia's security. So as far as current government is there, it's clear that at the governmental level, Armenia will do nothing. The problem is that in the future, and no government will rule forever, I think this is one thing which everybody can be sure of. The problem is that because there is no Minsk group starting from September 1st, 2025, it will be extremely challenging for even the next government, whenever it comes in 2026 or later, to bring this question back to international fora because there are no platform. Of course, Azerbaijan will reject, and others will say, okay, there is no international fora. You cannot go to OSCE Minsk group to ask to establish any new group because Azerbaijan simply will veto it. So it's extremely challenging to see what can be done in international fora. But again, as far as current government is in place, I think it's up to Armenian society or part of Armenian society and part of Armenian diaspora. Not to forget about Nagorno-Karabakh, not to forget about ethnic cleansing, which happens there in 2023, not to forget about the right of return. But again, anything can be done, but I'm not sure how, only if there will be a government in Armenia, which again will say that, okay, guys, this issue should be, I'm going to bring back this issue. But I'm not in a position to say how it's going to do that. But until there is a government who thinks that this issue should be bring back, as a only option to keep this issue alive is through like civil activities or non-governmental activities in Armenia and in diaspora. I don't see any other way.
Okay. And for our last topic, let's talk a little bit about Russia and Azerbaijan again. Last week, Russian-Azerbaijani relations deteriorated further. In an Al Arabiya interview, which we will link to in our show notes, Ilham Aliyev called Russia an occupier since 1920 and again labeled the war in Ukraine as a Russian invasion. Unlike Pashinyan, Aliyev did not meet Putin on the sidelines of Shanghai Cooperation Organization, despite earlier rumors. Maybe they will meet again, but I'm not sure. I mean, it seems like most of the meetings, high-profile meetings, have already happened. And in Moscow, Duma member Konstantin Zadulin, known for his pro-Armenian views, but nevertheless, he told Lenta.ru that, and I'm quoting, "We should not delude ourselves about Azerbaijan or imagine it as our partner. That was a mistake or maybe a misunderstanding, depending on how you translate it." So I want to ask you at a very high level, how do you see the developments between Russia and Azerbaijan? How do you see the recent developments reflected on the overall Russia-Azerbaijan relationship?
Okay, my understanding is that President Aliyev really starts to believe that Azerbaijan is a middle power, really starts to believe to his own propaganda that Azerbaijan is a middle power, that if you jump into soccer terms, that Azerbaijan left the Europe League and now entered Champions League, and that the great powers should treat Azerbaijan as a middle power with respect. Of course, we may agree or may not agree, but I have doubts that Azerbaijan is a middle power. So I think that at this time, and maybe because he thinks that Israel is behind him, or I don't know, this Jewish lobby is behind him, or whoever is behind him, I think President Aliyev is now chewing a little bit more than he can digest. So let's wait how this situation will end. But again, he really believes that Azerbaijan is a middle power, something like almost equal to Turkey, to Israel, to Saudi Arabia. And he wants that Mr. Putin treats himself as he treats Erdogan or Mohammed bin Salman or others. But I think, at least here, Mr. Aliyev is doing big mistake. As far as I understand Russia, he will get his response. I don't know when, I don't know how, I simply don't know. But my understanding of Russia gives me the base to argue that President Aliyev will get quite tough response. Maybe not now, maybe, I don't know, 3 years from now, 10 years from now, maybe 3 months from now, I don't know. But this is my understanding of situation.
It's interesting to hear you say that it was all Aliyev's propaganda that is so good that you believe it yourself.
Yeah, sometimes I have a feeling that President Aliyev really believes to his own propaganda that Azerbaijan now next Israel, next Turkey, next Saudi Arabia. I don't know even, but to be very frank, it's a little bit ridiculous.
Yeah. And the other thing that's amazing is when we were mentioning Zatulin and what he has said, that is kind of an amazing amount of free speech and expression that they have, where he can come out and say basically he thinks that Russian foreign policy was on the wrong tracks about that. Come to the United States, be in the government, and say that, and let's see if you
I
keep
mean,
your
it's not that
government.
amazing for Russia, to be honest. I mean, I
know,
think
but
despite the
I
Western
mean,
propaganda.
here's the Western side, basically champions of human rights and free speech and expression and everything. And today, I don't think you can do that in the American government and still keep your job in the State Department.
All right, well, let's conclude the portion of our show with our guest, Benyamin. But before we go, I'd like to ask Benyamin and Asbed. Traditionally, Asbed is doing the asking, but we're gonna change the tradition. I wanted to ask Benyamin and Asbed about any thoughts that you might have, this week. So let's begin with Benyamin, if you don't mind.
Okay, we should not forget that tomorrow is September 2nd, the Declaration of Independence of Nagorno-Karabakh Republic. And we should not allow anyone to delete part of our memory, like simply to say that, okay, guys, forget 32 years of the existence of Nagorno-Karabakh Republic. I mean Armenian nation, we should not do that. It's very clear, and we discussed that under current circumstances, it's not clear how the Karabakh issue can be brought back into the international fora. Will it be brought back or is not going to be brought back? But again, at least within our consciousness, within our memory, we should not forget that we had the Second Armenian Republic for 32 years, September 1991, September 2023.
Benjamin, you stole a little bit of my thunder because I was also going to talk about September 2nd. So I'll just mention that, like Tevan said on our show last week in his personal thoughts, remember and celebrate independence of Artsakh, even under the current circumstances, because it is by keeping it alive in your hearts that we will one day make it happen again, that we return. Okay, a rally is planned. So today we are recording this on September 1st. Tomorrow, I believe, on September 2nd, there's a rally planned on Freedom Square in Yerevan. If you are there, please go join them and show your support.
Okay, I lied. I'm gonna say something because I think that yes, I agree. And keeping a memory alive doesn't mean just to keep it bottled in my head or in my heart, in my soul. It also means talking about it every opportunity I can and in public. I think we read one of the comments about that you guys keep complaining and not doing anything. Well, I'm doing everything I can within my purview and with my abilities on this platform. And we will continue talking about Artsakh. We will continue talking about the injustice that was bestowed upon the Armenians, partly thanks to the leadership of the Armenian traders that we have right now. And nothing is going to change about that. So, go take a cold shower if you want. I don't know. I don't know what else to say. And yes, definitely, I would urge everyone to also use September 2, not just to participate physically, but also online. And if you have any photos or anything about that you remember about Artsakh, now is a good time to share them.
Thank you, Hovik. That's not a breach of the contract here that you didn't want to have something to say, but I'm very happy you said that. All three of us about the independence of Artsakh on September 2nd. Okay, that's all the time we have. Thank you so much, Benjamin, for joining us. We really do appreciate you coming on our show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. Well, Asbed, our guest has just left, and I think that we are now free to talk about stories that are too hot, too weird, or just too corrupt to leave out. Let's start with you. What do you want to talk about?
Well, obviously, this past week there was a big rally, and on Friday, jail tycoon Samvel Karapetyan launched his new movement. We've been expecting to see this. It's called Our Way, MER DZEVOV, and you can use the hashtag MER DZEVOV, which he said will become a political force in the 2026 elections. I was a little confused because I read some articles where it said MER DZEVOV should be an apolitical movement, and then there were some articles that said it's going to be a force in the 2026 elections. So it remains to be seen exactly how this whole thing is going to pan out. Now, the head of the movement is Samvel's nephew, Narek Karapetyan, and that is because Samvel holds dual Russian and Armenian citizenship, which would prevent him from becoming prime minister. So it's not exactly clear who would head this party if it goes into the elections. And you might ask, why is the man in jail? Well, we've talked about this. Beyond all of the harassments of nationalizing his electric company of Armenia, ENA, Electric Network of Armenia, there are claims of corruption, et cetera, et cetera. But the reality is that Pashinyan has basically said, and we're providing all these links in the show notes, he's basically said that it's because Samvel Karapetyan would run in the 2026 elections, and we know how widely popular he is. He's popular with anti-government circles and he's popular with anti-opposition circles. Both of those constituencies are highly unpopular. We've seen the polls. We've discussed the polls. For example, the Pashinyan and civil contract polls indicate that they are in the teens, like 13 to 17% popularity. The same thing with the opposition. But if you come to Samvel Karapetyan, he's tapping into the 60 to 70% of disenchanted people, and he represents a credible potential for winning the coming elections, and that's why I think he's in jail.
Yeah, and if you watch the press conference that was given by Narek Karapetyan, he basically said that this movement that they're starting is apolitical, or essentially more focused on being a forum for technocrats. But the actual founding of a political party and the political movement is scheduled for later in the year. I believe he mentioned December as a time frame. So it seems like they are delaying the political activities, the actually direct political activities until December. But obviously these are all related. So they're going to use this.
Do you think that they expect Samvel will be out of jail by then?
I don't think so, unless unless things change drastically. But I believe that this is basically like electioneering under any other name. But I think it's good for the Karapetyan team to talk about the problems that the Pashinyan regime is bringing forward without specifically jumping into politics.
Hovik, what do you have?
So on this topic, we talked about the electric networks of Armenia. Was one of Karapetyan's companies that is being nationalized by Pashinyan, and there was this press conference that Pashinyan gave where he said something to the effect of "the government is me." It reminded me of Louis XIV's famous statement. How do you say it? Is it "l'état c'est moi" or
"l'état c'est moi"? Sorry, I don't know exactly how Louis XIV would sound.
Anyway, so more details about this. So Pashinyan was giving a press conference, and during that press conference, he effectively fired the state's top lawyer, Liparit Dermeyan, who had previously warned regulators to obey the Stockholm arbitration order that warns Armenia not to mess with the electric utility while arbitration is pending. And it's funny because the statement from Liparit Dermeyan was more like, in general, orders from the arbitration court are binding, but, he provided a proviso. Pashinyan didn't find that very funny. And at the press conference, when he was asked about Dermeyan's statement, he pretended that he didn't know about it and delivered the statement, "I am the government," and said that anyone who disagrees with this should resign or be fired.
Hovik,
And just like
can I just bring in for 1 second the Zatulin thing? Just imagine a person in the Armenian government here who is having a disagreement and voices it, right?
yeah.
In Russia, you can do that, and in Armenia, you can't do that.
Well, I mean, Zatulin is a member of the legislature, but I get that point.
Just imagine Alen Simonian coming out and saying that he disagrees with Pashinyan.
Well, Alen
And let's see
Simonian is
how
not
long
also
he keeps his speakership.
So I get it. There's this dividing line between executive and in the executive branch versus legislative. But in any case, immediately after that statement, Liparit was gone. Can we say au revoir, Liparit, and l'état-c'est-moi
That's a lot of
again?
French today in our show.
Yeah. So here's the kicker. The lawyers from Samvel Karapetyan, who are seeking up to a 500 million judgment in damages, thanked Pashinyan for helping their arbitration case. With each, it seems like with each podium mic drop, Pashinyan is, solving the case for the Liparitian, for the Karapetyan lawyers. But the real kicker, do you want to know the real kicker, Asbed?
Tell me.
So who else should Pashinyan appoint as a replacement for Liparit Dermea, you may ask?
Oh, well, I happen to know. So I'm not going to be very good at feigning surprise, but I was surprised when I heard it, and I go, oh my God.
Yeah.
Talk
So
about
remember
strange
this guy,
bedfellows.
Karen Andreasyan, as the head of the Supreme Judicial Council, he was supposed to be independent, right? And yet in 2024, he basically resigned after Pashinyan told him to resign in a WhatsApp message. This is not fiction. This is Pashinyan admitting
he was
himself
one
that
of 8 people who got fired by text.
Yeah, so we thought like normal people would think, oh, this is basically burning the bridges between two people. But that's the quality of government officials in Armenia, where you can be fired and rehired as long as you toe the line. And it's clear that Karen Andreasyan is one of those lowlifes that fits the criteria of being in the employ of Pashinyan.
We told you last week on our show that when you hear somebody terrible is getting fired, don't celebrate. It's a very small circle of, acolytes, minions, and it's a revolving door policy. You'll get fired from something, just wait it out for a month or so, you'll get promoted to something else. And so as one example, well, it's not a good example here, but Lilith Maguns, who left the embassy in Washington, D.C., is now appointed an advisor of the prime minister.
Chief advisor
of the prime minister. You know what I thought about that, Hovik? I thought, hey, I think the IQ level in that room just went up. Hovik, let's talk a little bit about this Netanyahu recognizing the Armenian genocide issue. Because speaking on the Armenian-American Patrick Bet-David's podcast, Israeli Prime Minister Benyamin Netanyahu was asked why no Israeli government has done that, and he said basically, I just have. There you go. He personally recognizes the Armenian genocide as a genocide, and well, you should, of course, read the Armenian media. They exploded saying that Israel has just recognized the Armenian genocide. Many of them took off and put these claims all over the place. It basically went viral. Unfortunately, I think Netanyahu did a personal recognition, simply saying, I just did. He didn't say anything else. The Israeli Knesset has never voted on this issue, even though Netanyahu said something about
the Knesset voting. Yeah, he lied.
Basically, he lied. The Knesset has not voted on this. Israel has not officially, as a country, recognized this. And past efforts have always fallen victim to Turkish-Israeli relations and politics.
And not just in Israel. I mean, the AIPAC lobby, or the Israeli lobby in the United States, is the chief reason why American recognition was delayed for so many years. So this is just a cynical ploy by a genocider himself, Netanyahu, to try to deflect, attention away from Israel. But of course, this didn't stop the government of another genocidal regime, Turkey, to condemn Netanyahu's statement, and they're very reactive. But guess who else didn't like Netanyahu's recognition, Asbed?
I can guess.
Well, yes, you guessed it right, Pashinyan. In March, he promised Erdogan that Armenia would no longer prioritize international recognition of the Armenian genocide, and called those resolutions by countries who have recognized it as undermining regional stability. And he continued doing so, and he said that recognition of the Armenian genocide has nothing to do with Armenia and Armenia's foreign policy.
You know what's interesting? I was looking through the news, of course, and there's this Arar Civilizational Research Foundation. And there was an article summarizing its research findings and the surveys that it has done. Hovik, guess what is the #1 topic that Armenians agree on as far as Armenia's international policy goes? Okay.
I don't know if it's any red-blooded Armenian, I would say it's a genocide.
Of course, 95.1% of surveyed people basically said the international recognition of the Armenian genocide is the highest priority. And this has to contrast with what Pashinyan has said. I only found an article that summarized it, and there was a broken link in it. So I've requested to get a link to the full research paper. As soon as we get that, we will put it in the show notes as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's not so. I don't know if it's something to be proud of, because if you keep being genocided, then of course recognition of your genocide will be the #1 priority for you and your family members. And it's just surreal that people tell us to just let bygones be bygones when it was just 2 years ago. I would say that was the most recent iteration of the Armenian genocide. I mean, if you look at the historical links between what happened in Artsakh, I mean, it didn't just start in the 1990s. It started in the 1910s, and the issue of Artsakh, many historians argue, is very closely related to the Armenian genocide and the attempts by the Young Turks government to, cleanse its region of Armenians, of the Christian presence of Armenians.
Well, look, in the early part of the century, in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, Nakhichevan was 40% Armenian, and that was down from the 19th century, and there's nobody there now, and all of our monuments have been destroyed. Artsakh until 2023 was, well, okay, so if we go back with the Artsakh issue, all the way back to, what was it? Let's say 1990, because I don't know the exact dates. It was something like 75% down from the 90s% Armenian, and now there's nobody
let's
there.
go back even further.
Right.
Let's go back in the 1920s.
This is a genocide.
Yeah, in the 1920s, the population of Artsakh was 90% Armenian.
Mhm.
It was one of the most it was the most heavily Armenian populated district region, because through years of genocide, even let's say in historical Western Armenia, like Van before the genocide had 70% Armenian population, while Artsakh was the most heavily populated Armenian territory, and now that is gone. So yeah.
I mean,
keep your keep criticism to yourself.
Even Glendale is only 50% Armenian. Hovik, you know what leads to genocide? Treason leads to genocide.
Of course, yes.
And the Armenian consul to Austria, Ashken Alexanian, was arrested upon her return to Yerevan 2 months ago. Apparently, the NSS found documents that indicated that she had potentially spied for Azerbaijan, another case of having a romantic relationship with an Azeri, or so it seems. Anyway, they searched the foreign ministry building, computers, documents, etc., and they decided to cover it up because if people found out, it could cause panic.
Cover what up?
I don't know. There's no information. Even her social media presence has been wiped out.
Yeah, and I have a few problems. I mean, obviously, I think we have to take this with a grain of salt, because the Pashinyan regime itself is led by a traitor at the top. So I don't know what information could an employee of the foreign ministry divulge that is worse than what Pashinyan has said. But also what's interesting is that all of this happened about a month ago. So we're learning about this development 1 month too late. And that speaks about the level of democracy and in Armenia, where key things like this are kept covered up until the last minute.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on. What else do you have?
On the topic of treason, you know that Armenia is cracking down on unauthorized photos of military positions.
Yeah, those have been illegal.
Yeah. In the past, Armenia has arrested even soldiers for treason after they have shared photos with hot chicks or what they thought to be hot chicks and turned out to be foreign agents, according to government allegations. Armenia has also passed laws banning the photography near the border, and it's not clear whether it's like 1 kilometer from the border or half a kilometer. But in any case, if you take a picture from the Armenian border that the Armenian government doesn't like, you will be arrested. Even opposition MPs are complaining that they are unable to inspect all military positions that they request. So here's a question, Asbed. If photos of military positions are banned, who will actually get stopped? The conscript who shares a selfie with a fake hot chick? The MP with a badge who wants to inspect border posts? Or a Swiss social media influencer?
The
If
MP.
you answer that the conscript will get the handcuffs, the influencer gets the vodka and the views, and the MP gets the closed door, then you're right. And that is real life. What I'm talking about is the case of a Swiss influencer by the name of Sandro Schmid posting a video on July 31st from an Armenian border post that drew over 400,000 views. And about a month later, the Papikyan Defense Ministry, and I'm not going to call it the Armenian Defense Ministry, I'm going to call it the Papikyan Defense Ministry, said that it was opening an investigation. And in the clip, a motorcyclist reaches the last outpost on the Armenian border. He clearly films border positions, and he films the border guards offering him vodka and then cursing Putin. Meanwhile, as we said, opposition MPs are banned from even inspecting those borders, and they can't share any information. But here's a tourist, let's call him a tourist. I want to be generous. Maybe he's a spy, who knows? But he was openly filming Armenian border positions, and his video is still up on Facebook.
Hovik, last week we visited the topic of Pashinyan freezing the Armenian defense budget. I'm so sore about that. Even though I wanted to talk about it a little more this week, I'm not going to do that. But I'm very sore about that because it just feels to me like it's a self-imposed disarming of Armenia. So there's no real defense department right now, as far as I can tell. It's the Babikyan Pashinyan defense. I'll quote unquote.
It's not self-imposed. It's an occupational government.
For my next topic, we'll try and keep these things short because we're going on and on. James O'Brien, who served as Assistant Secretary of State in the Biden administration, portrayed the August 8 deal as a major win for Azerbaijan and said that Armenia will see no dividends. He said substantially no dividends from peace. He also said that Aliyev's preconditions to change the Armenian constitution, which Pashinyan is planning to implement, we know this, will not happen before 2026, the elections, and will hurt him in the elections. All that was achieved was the corridor through Armenia and a few other demands like today's dissolution of the OSCE MG, and the tearing down of the Section 907, and so on. Well, in response, Pashinyan slammed back. He said that he had never been satisfied by the support of the Biden administration, and he effectively pointed the finger at them for the event, I'll air quote this, the events of 2021, 2022, and 2023. This is what he wrote. Well, frankly, I was slightly surprised that Pashinyan would even mention the events of 2021, 2022, 2023, because at the time, all he did was basically pull the rug over those events and did his best to hush up the events when Armenian soldiers were shot and murdered execution style in border posts by Azeri invaders, mutilated their bodies, raped and dismembered women soldiers, ethnically cleansed the Armenians of Artsakh, and a million other things. I don't know what to say that Pashinyan would not come out and say anything about these things. And now, as a political slapback, because he can see that his position has been weakened by the U.S. itself. He's slapping back and saying he was never satisfied with the Biden administration.
Right. And unless you are visiting our show the first time, we will classify this as scumbaggery, to say the least.
All right. Let me remind everybody, tomorrow, September 2nd, Artsakh Independence Day. We're going to leave it there for today. That's all for today. That was our weekend review show recorded on September 1st, 2025. It's Labor Day in the United States. We've been talking with Dr. Benyamin Poghosyan, who's a senior fellow at APRI Armenia, Armenia, a Yerevan-based think tank, and he's also the chairman of the Center for Political and Economic Strategic Studies.
Folks, if there's one thing you can do to help us, I'm going to just say it outright. Please go to Apple Podcasts and make sure you're subscribed to us. And if you're already subscribed, then consider rating our show. I'll just leave it there.
Do I get one wish?
Yes.
Substack. Subscribe to us on Substack also.
All
Okay.
right. You got a choice then.
Thank you. For more information on everyone and all of the links that we will provide in the show notes, go there. It's podcasts.groong.org/episode number. So this one I think will be 467. So it'll be podcasts.groong.org/467, and you'll get there. I'm Asbed Bedrosyan. I'm in Los Angeles.
And I'm Hovik Manucharyan. I will keep you in suspense about where I am, but yes, I'm not in Armenia right now.
Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.